Hello and welcome to this Mastering the Machine Automation Academy webinar for August 26th, 2022. My guest today was Brennan from Blue Collar Automation, and he told us a lot about the things that he works on and how he got started in industrial automation and system integration. Hope you enjoy it. This is an Automation Academy Mastering the Machine webinar for the 26th of August, 2022. And today's topic, I put topic down here, but that's actually my guest, is Brennan from Blue Collar Automation. And you can see a little picture there. And I always do a little blurb here and explain why I do this. Phil knows very well why I do this. Phil's been on a lot of my webinars. What is Mastering the Machine? It's named after a document called Mastering the Machine that was all about specifying machinery, systems integration, things like that. And Brennan would be familiar with this. This was the way that Wright Industries did it, which is now JR Automation, who Brennan has also worked for. So you're familiar with that. So that's where I got a lot of my how do the big boys spec machines and quote them, and what kind of documentation is required to do that. And you can download that stuff. It's an old document now at these two websites. That's where I keep them. What is the Automation Academy? About 2 years ago, I created this website, and it is a membership site, and I put training videos, PLC videos, things like that for Allen Bradley, Siemens, and Omron. And I really didn't want to just be another PLC video maker. There's a lot of them out there, and they're all very good at what they do. So it's kind of evolved into more of a systems integration website. It has a whole lot of documents on it, some software, regular events, some videos, things like that. And I put a star here by this community with interest groups because I do have some news today. The community, Phil would recognize this because this is what the community used to look like, right? On the website, we used to have a little community there with forums, groups, and people could put profiles on there and things like that. And what happened was people weren't really using it much. I mean, I was paying, several $100s a year for it, and people would, leave messages every once in a while, but it wasn't real active. So I discontinued it, and I left the forums on there, but I discontinued Buddy Boss, which was the platform that I had it on. Well, that I tried to reinstate it, but it crashed my website. So to try to put it back in there, there's something incompatible about it. So I've decided to put it on a different platform. It'll still be under my domain, but it'll be a completely separate website, and I'm going to open it up to everybody. It's going to be for, a lot of us talk on LinkedIn and stuff. What this will do is people can put a profile on there. They can join different interest groups, Allen Bradley, Siemens, Vision Systems, Beckhoff. I've been doing a lot of Beckhoff lately. So I'm hoping to get people like Jacob Sagatowski to join up with that. So this is going to be a new thing. This is in process. They're working on the website, and it will be something that just anybody can sign up for and talk on. So that's kind of a new approach on it. So today's guest is Brennan, and I had a picture of him then on the first page. But Brennan owns a company called Blue Collar Automation. We've been talking lately. We kind of met based on somebody was looking for a systems integrator in Memphis. And surprisingly, they said they couldn't find anybody. And I was like, well, you know what? On LinkedIn, I'm quite sure I know somebody I've been talking to lately that's in Memphis and does systems integration. And they said, no, I can't find anybody at all. So I referred Brennan to them. And also there's other, bigger companies that have engineers out there and things like that, but they did want to, some kind of a support right there locally. And I think Brennan's halfway in contact with them now, but things are going slowly. For somebody who wanted help very, very quickly, it's kind of been put on the back burner or something because they're not getting back in touch. But anyway, with no further ado, I will present Brennan. Good to talk to you today.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Frank. Thanks for having me on here. It's cool to see this community growing and be able to talk to people about similar interests. I mean, you could probably attest that you kind of feel like you're out on an island in controls, not a ton of people that do it. And there's there's even few that like doing it, I guess, if you will. And I had an interesting conversation with someone yesterday about how the reason there were so many controls engineers in the older generation was because all these big tech companies didn't exist. So now all these analytical people who used to work, who would go into working on controls or PLCs or robotics, they're going to do software stuff in a completely different industry. And so we were talking about how that could potentially be why there's so few automation engineers wanting to do this anymore and coming into the market as well. Because as you know, if they couldn't find a single integrator in Memphis, right? There are a couple process integrators here that do some stuff, but we're the only robotics integrator within 100 miles that I know of. And it's hard to find any help, man. It's hard to find anyone, any help to do anything. But the University of Memphis has a $500,000 robotics lab, and they're pumping out controls engineers. So I have a little bit of faith in the South for controls work.
Yeah. Well, as you know, also people have to know a little piece of everything, right? People a lot of times try to concentrate on one thing, and they go to school and they study mechatronics, right? And they may decide, well, I just want to do PLC programming. I get that a lot. And I always tell people, well, you got to know basic electricity first. It's really helpful if you can maybe wire a control panel, but at the very least be able to troubleshoot one, right? And figure out what's wrong with the system and understand the mechanical parts. So
yeah, I got my electrical engineering technology degree from IUPUI, Purdue, Indianapolis. And when I first started at JR, I didn't even understand how a motor starter worked or a relay. I knew what it did, but I didn't know how it worked. So now, day one, I get 92 sets of prints for a massive machine just dropped on my desk. And they said, hey, start going to meetings and start designing all the distribution for 480, 120, PLC, HMIs, everything. And like, I would secretly, I don't know if I've ever told anybody this, but I would bring a power supply to my desk with a meter, and I would try to figure out how the hell this thing worked. And I'm like, how do you wire this? Because you're passing 120 or 480 with 24 volts, and I'm like, I don't know how this works. And so I'm sitting here testing, and then that motor contactor pulled in, and I tested the voltage. I'm like, oh, I get it. But you don't learn that in school. You learn a little bit, but it was a lot of hands-on experience. JR taught me everything that I know about controls engineering just because of the sheer volume of work they do. The first project we were on had probably 12 FANUC robots, 4 of which were upside down on a gantry, and 15 stations we automated. And it was massive. It had Cognex, Tox, Allen Bradley, had oiling systems, robots, vision. We used every Cognex thing you could imagine. So it was a learning experience, and you did not learn any of that in school. And so it's funny you say that, because I've ran into multiple people on job sites who don't want to do other things, and it's like, oh, well, how does this work? Well, I don't know. That's not my responsibility. Well, that's my responsibility, so I got to figure it out.
It's interesting. I kind of came in from the other direction. I was in the Air Force for years, and then when I got to school, took engineering class. First assignment we had was to build a power supply. It was actually use transistors, design one, match them up, and we built one. So I kind of knew what it did, but like you, I got to industry and I didn't know what a motor starter was. I knew that we have to close contacts to make a motor run, but I didn't know that an overload is part of a motor starter. At that time they were the little removable bimetallic ones, big NEMA starters. Now they're almost throwaway components, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the first panel I ever built was in college. Me and a guy, my friend Nick Linehan. He's a controls engineer at Flexware in Indianapolis. But we did a senior design project together because everyone was doing Arduino projects and just little projects that wouldn't have helped them in a factory floor. And so the chair of the department, she came to me and was like, hey, we have this old batch mixing skid done by a bunch of people from Eli Lilly and Vertellus Chemical. You want to redo it? It's been sitting for 10 years. Wow. So me and Nick were like, yeah, we'll redo it. We'll just reuse everything, write a little bit of code. We were kind of probably thinking, oh, this is going to be easy. Well, we get this thing. It'd been sitting so long. The solenoids were locked. There was no prints, no wiring diagram, no labels, no nothing. So had just had a newborn, and we were working on this, both working full-time jobs, coming in at night. And it got to the point where one night we were tracing out wires, and I was like, dude, we're never going to get this done. We might as well just trash it, because the code was a micrologics that had no comments. So we had no idea what any of the code meant either. So one night at about 10 p.m., after we got written permission from the dean to stay in the lab past midnight, I was like, why don't we just rip this apart and redo the whole thing? And he was like, let's do it. So we ripped apart this whole panel, documented everything that was on it, tried to figure out how this solid state relay worked. And we reverse engineered this whole panel, built the panel, wrote all the PLC code, created an HMI, and we created this batch mixing skid that you took green and blue water, and it would drain certain amounts into a big 50-gallon bucket barrel. And then we had an auger that would agitate the water and turn it blue and yellow and turn it green. And so that was our mixing process. And then we would circulate that to a finished product tank. We'd take a level, and then we'd circulate it all back to the top. And that project alone got us more controls experience. Like, we had job offers coming in left and right on senior design day because of that project. But yeah, that was our first, like, let's figure this out. And we did the same thing, a multimeter and a power supply, trying to figure out how these solid state relays worked.
So whatever got you started in controls in the first place, did you know what it was when you decided to go to school, or had you been tinkering with stuff?
No, actually I didn't. So my dad, the company is actually named after my dad. My dad has been 42 years in the as a millwright and an electrician for the same factory in my hometown. And I went to school for electrical engineering, and I hated it. I thought it was miserable. It was all real awful theory. And I like working with my hands. I worked in a factory with him, in summers. They just paid me to do stupid stuff. But I like working with my hands. We built stuff. We flipped houses. We worked on cars. So I dropped out. I dropped out of college my first year. And my dad had a contractor who I didn't know at the time was not an electrician. But I told my dad, I'm going to be an electrician. I'm going to do what you do. I don't want to go to college. I don't want debt. I want to do what you do. He goes, okay, well, let's do this first. Why don't you work with this electrician for a few months, see how you like it, and then make your decision. Well, little did I know, this guy was a mechanical contractor. It was in the middle of February in central Indiana, and they were building a dust collector outside. And he told this contractor to work me so hard that I wanted to go back to college. So this guy worked me to absolute death. I had to cut the fingers off my gloves to start all the bolts. It's snowing. It was miserable. So then I met a PLC programmer from Outbound Technologies. I met this guy in Indianapolis and just started BSing with him about what he did. My dad's like, this is what you should do. And because he told me to go to school for electrical engineering, and that's what he meant. He just never told me because he didn't really know what it was per se. Once I got talking to this guy, I figured out what electrical engineering technology was, and I re-enrolled, 2 months late, and I did so well in the class that my professor, Joe Tabus, who's been one of the biggest mentors of my life, getting me to where I am and helping me get that confidence back. He showed me what controls was, and he told me about this job. Like, he's like, oh, plugging into that PLC, that's not the only thing you can do. He showed me what robotics were. He told me about programming. He told me about all the wiring and motors. Like, he taught us everything. And so it was pretty much him and my dad that kind of pushed me in this direction. And I was working as a controls engineer at a massive pharmaceutical company in Indianapolis before I even graduated college. I mean, I was working full time. I'd already accepted an offer. I was just finishing senior design. And so I was just head on into controls, and I haven't looked back since.
You were very lucky to be so early at JR to be in the controls engineering space. I worked it there at Wright, and I was hired in as a senior guy because I'd done it for 20 years at the time. But there were guys there that would come out of Purdue, and all they do is do schematic drawings for 5 years. And then finally they get a little taste of, maybe they get to shadow a controls engineer and go out and start the equipment up, but they didn't get to move into it nearly as quickly. So that's awesome. Yeah.
Well, I also went to a location in Stevensville that was called Dane Systems. And so they didn't become JR until JR was bought out. So I came in the year they got bought out. My paycheck said Dane, but I worked at JR, and luckily they were short staffed. So like my boss in my interview, he's like, "Can you read prints?" Yep. He brought a set of prints in, had me read them. And I mean, they put me on this project immediately. And so I would say I got 3 years of experience in a year and 10 months before I went to work for Rockwell. I got so much exposure, and it was only because controls engineers were hard to find and I was willing to work.
Yeah. What did you do for Rockwell?
So for Rockwell, I was actually stationed at a pharmaceutical manufacturer. So funny story, actually. I worked for a company in college. I had accepted an offer and I was working at a pharmaceutical manufacturer, and I didn't really like it. You know, it was a lot of paperwork, and I wanted to learn about robots. You know, I really liked the company I worked for, Ace Technologies. Eric Armstrong was, you know, he's a genius. He taught me a lot about like Allen Bradley controls, like while I was there, and a lot about like PIDs and stuff. And but unfortunately, I wanted to learn robotics, and JR offered me a job, and I couldn't turn it down. So anyway, fast forward, I take a job with Rockwell as a field service engineer, not knowing. I thought I was just going to work out of the Rockwell office, do projects. Oh no, I got stationed at the same pharmaceutical manufacturer in the same building on the same floor at the same row as my previous employer. So I was doing the exact same job as before I got out of college. Yeah, what are the odds of that? I wanted to be on their automotive team, but got put on the pharmaceutical team because they had a need. But I after leaving JR and working as much as I did enjoy working at the pharmaceutical manufacturer a lot more. And Rockwell's had a team there for 20 years, so they taught me everything. It was pretty cool.
So I noticed also on your website, which I have up on a different screen here, you had a lot of the products listed that you use, which are a lot of the same ones I do: AB, Siemens, Mitsubishi, robotics, Fanuc, Universal, and you're an authorized Universal integrator.
Yeah. So when I first started blue collar about a year ago, you know, Fanuc was all I knew as far as the industrial side goes from JR, because that's, you know, they're the biggest Fanuc integrator in the country at the time. So my website really hasn't been updated. You know, we do ABB, UR, Casso, Yaskawa. We do more Yaskawa than Fanuc now, actually. But you know, funny enough, I've got a Yaskawa robot in my hand I'm twiddling with. But yeah, I saw collaborative robotics slowly start coming into the pharmaceutical space, and I knew that they were going to be huge because Fanuc had their first go with those ugly green robots, right? Mm-hmm. And we did a couple of them at JR, but you know, we didn't have much luck at the time. You know, that was 6 years ago, and I knew it was going to be huge, and I knew that I could do full systems by myself at the time. So I went and did UR training and just hit the ground running with UR projects. And funny enough, UR is 90% of the work that I quote and do right now. You know, we're quoting so much work, machine tending, sanding, welding, a ton of projects just that are semi-automated, right? So like, let's get this operator to stop sanding this part over and over. So now, you know, we're loading 10 jigs and sanding it with one robot and auto changing out the sandpaper, you know. Those are the type of stuff that we're doing now. But we're getting into a ton of stuff. Like, you know, next week we're going to program some ABB robots, and it's all over the place right now.
That is awesome. Yeah, I saw a lot of the Universal stuff, some pictures, and interestingly, that I was going to segue a little bit into that MEP Center for Industrial Services University thing that's here in Tennessee. Yeah, Phil actually was attached to the University of Tennessee also with some things, but one of their big focuses was collaborative robots. And that's something they're pushing in this state. The idea was to be able to, because there was such an employment problem, to be able to augment the workforce. So that's something else that you may want to talk to them about. That seems to be a big hot button for them, is collaborative robots.
I would love to do something like that, because at my last employer, at the last plant that I worked at, I mean, we had 5 stations where we would just pay temp workers to load cans into boxes, right? And I've been telling them for months, I've been telling them, like, I could put a UR10E or a Casso 18, I could put one of these robots in there, and I could load and package those with nobody, you know, and they run 3 shifts a day, 5 days a week. And our average ROI for $100,000 project on a 3-shift operation is 3 months.
Wow.
So think about it. You pay $100,000 essentially for, let's say, a UR, a really nice vention weldment, and some robotic grippers, right? That'll get you in the door with a lot of mundane tasks. And if you're paying someone an average of $19 an hour, 3 shifts in a week, 1 operator per shift, you're paying back in 3 months. We have some facilities, automotive facilities, where you got $10,000 a minute you go down. Mm-hmm. So repurposing, and we don't get rid of people. That's the other thing, the misconception with collaborative robotics is I factor 2 days of training into every project I do. And what I say is, hey, Phil, we're going to automate this task. Maybe the operator has to load parts, but the robot does the work. But we're going to spend 2 days training your operator to be a robot technician. So now they own that robot. They know how to jog it. They know how to fix it if it goes down. They know how to adjust points. They know how to do software updates. They know how to take off the tooling and put on new tooling. I make it to where, James Dean has a phrase he uses all the time, budget automation, right? I don't want to come nickel and dime every customer, and you know this. I don't want to go back and work on the same crap over and over and over and over and over if I don't have to. So why not train them? They buy the initial system and 5 models from me, and then they do the other 20 themselves. Because now you're saving, if it takes me 6 hours per model times another 20 models, that's another 120 hours of engineering time you're going to pay for me to sit there and do this, something I could have taught you in 4 hours. And that's at least my take on it. And we don't lock any code or anything like that. So we give them everything. And that's where I think collaborative robots, working in tandem with people, I think that's the future. We just looked at a project last week, picking up a part, flipping it, putting in something. Robot will do that all day long, and it doesn't require benefits or sick days.
Yeah. So do you create material for training those people? Just kind of get the manuals out and maybe video some of it, or how do you do that?
I would love to do that. I just haven't had the time. We're traveling so much doing programming and installs right now, and then we got guys at the shop building for all the projects we're working on that there's really no time to do it. I would love to do that sometime though, because that would make my life a lot easier to say, hey, here's some materials to get started, and then I'll show you in my code, because I try to write modular code, right? Subroutines that you can call with variables, so that it's like, hey, our box changed. We want to change the pick position in the X direction 5 inches. Okay, 250 millimeters in this variable, and you're done for every program.
Yeah. I run into the same thing on machine vision, that people need to learn how to maintain those systems. You put them in, but then they're going to call you up in the middle of the night, machine vision systems down. They really need to know how to maintain them themselves, get into the software. And, most of the time it's just, I don't know, the lighting's changed or the image is somehow different, and they can figure it out, but they have to go through the training. That is awesome.
These parts aren't degreased, or these parts are this, or there's an extra hole. Yeah, we ran into that at JR as well.
Yeah. Let's see. I also saw, AB Siemens. How much Siemens are you running into now?
So we're actually doing more Siemens than Allen Bradley right now. Funny enough, is wow. I've got an S7 that I do a lot of training with, and we have one customer that their whole base is Siemens, and then I'm slowly quoting more and more and more Siemens, because for one, their software, you buy and own it, and it's a lot cheaper than Rockwell.
Yes.
Two, the availability from secondhand places is pretty great. And then 3, they have everything in one place, which I think is really cool. The TIA portal is super powerful, and I'm very biased, right? Like JR is a Rockwell house. Yeah. I worked for Rockwell. I've done only Rockwell until now. Now I've do a little bit of Mitsubishi. Shout out to Edwin Daniels, guy who trained me on Mitsubishi and over in Knoxville. And then Siemens has all been self-taught. I have 2 buddies that have given me some rundown, but other than that, it's all self-taught, and that's what we're quoting on a lot of stuff because of lead time too.
It's interesting. You mentioned Edwin Daniels. That was a name I was trying to come up with. He is kind of the Mitsubishi training guy for Tennessee. I had somebody coming to me, and his name wasn't coming to mind. So thanks for reminding me.
That's kind of why I said it to you, because I knew you were in the same industry and you lived in Knoxville. And yeah, he trained me up on Mitsubishi. He's a really good guy.
Yeah. So did you deal with Bertelkamp much? Are they your vendor for that, or there's other ones?
No. Edwin Daniels owns his own company. He doesn't work for Camp. He's Global Automation Training Solutions.
Yep.
And he has his own test beds. Camp is my distributor.
Okay. Yeah.
I was getting trained for some contract work. So James Dean is friends with Edwin Daniel, and he said, "Hey man, this is a Mitsubishi guy," and another guy out of Nashville, Chris Keith. He pointed me to Edwin Daniels. So
I know Chris too. Yeah.
Two people put me in the direction because I put an APB out on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Chris is in this area though. He's in Nashville area. Yeah.
Nashville.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He contacts me every once in a while. I think I maybe pointed him Edwin's way 4 or 5 years ago. So that's how they met, I think.
Would not surprise me.
Yeah, it's a kind of a small world out here, but we have so much automation just in this state.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy how little there is in the Memphis area, though. You know, it's like Memphis is this area is like scared of automation, is what it seems like, and everything is old, and they just try to maintain.
Yeah. You guys are getting a new battery plant, though, aren't you, or an electric vehicle plant or something?
We're getting a big Ford plant in Jackson. Yeah, massive Ford electric vehicle plant in Jackson, Tennessee. Okay. And then that's the only one I know of right now.
Okay, I thought it was closer to Memphis, but yeah, Jackson's not too far for you.
Yeah, it's only an hour and 20 minutes. It's not far.
Okay. And Cognex and Keyence, of course, that very common. Tell me about data logic.
So data logic is something new that we started toying with because I have a really good distributor down here I work with that uses data logic. And so I haven't done any jobs with it yet, but I hear that it is very powerful. You know, when I did a lot of work in the package sortation industry, the scan tunnels were either SICK or data logic. They were not Cognex, which was very shocking to me going in there because I did only Cognex until this year. And so I still predominantly use Cognex, but we try to quote data logic and get into other areas when we can because they make a good product as well and it plays well with other stuff. But yeah, SICK and data logic are all you see in package sortation facilities.
I didn't even know SICK had vision. I know they have fancy sensors, but I didn't know about their vision system.
Yeah, they've got a really, really awesome scan tunnel that they can scan barcodes with.
So October is the Vision Show in Boston.
Yeah.
And I am going to that this year. It has been probably 15 years since I've been.
I've never been. If I can make it, it's going to be the first year that I will go. And I'm also going to IMTS in Chicago in September.
Okay. What's amazing about the Vision Show is they really get down to the board level frame grabber stuff. And I've started seeing Phil actually was my guest on this. He's attending here, and he had shown me just a little like a Raspberry Pi based very small camera that he did some basic kind of machine vision on that could do facial recognition, and it's with a less than $100 camera into a frame grabber.
Wow. That's surprising. That would make my comment about irrelevant Arduino Raspberry Pi projects relevant.
Yeah, I don't know how long they last. Phil, what did you use on that?
I use something called OpenMV, and it's a low-cost machine vision camera that's available. I wouldn't call it industrial grade, right? So it's not going to come in a nice case that's waterproof or dust-proof, but it's definitely worth checking out and playing around with.
Write that down.
It's OpenMV.
OpenMV.
Yeah. So one of the things at the Vision Show, there's a lot more of the board level stuff than there is the smart cameras. So Matrox is a huge vendor out there, and they sell all little, just stuff that goes into your computer. Now, again, it's been 15 years since I've been out there, but Edmund Scientific, all these people have these little kind of component level vision systems that allow you to put your own thing together. I did a job for something called Map Vision. It's IMAP. It was had like 30 cameras that did 3D modeling of dashboards. It would look at automotive parts, and it would take a 3D model and then examine the part and see where it was warped, right? It was
Really?
just things were out of position, and it would flag points on it in, green, yellow, or red. Red meant it was kind of bent to the point where it's not going to necessarily go in the car. So same thing, like you said, a scan tunnel, they would send it in there. It would actually build a 3D model of the part with a whole bunch of cameras.
That's getting really popular, actually. So we've got another partner in Memphis, Casey Shockey with Chief Engineering. He kind of built his business. He was in the dust collector business in the beginning, but he kind of built his business off 3D scanning. So, if you have a gear that doesn't have a print, right, and it's broken, he will bring his 3D LiDAR scanner and scan this thing, and it will turn it into a 3D model that they can then put back together and create a print and go get a new one machined. Or he does something really cool that I want to start doing on my stuff. It's a value add, it costs money, right? But he's got this really cool LiDAR scanner, and I'm probably going to butcher this if he listens to this, but what he does is, let's say that, your customer wants a new dust collection system in an existing facility. What he'll do is he'll take this LiDAR scanner and he'll go scan the whole inside of the building, and it takes pictures. So it's like he makes a 3D model of the inside of the building, and then he drops it in SolidWorks and puts the new stuff and routes it. And that's how they figure out if they're going to hit stuff. So he can do all this pre-engineering before it ever goes in the building. And he is doing an incredible job, because they're hiring like crazy and doing a lot of really, really cool work.
Wow, that sounds like a great resource. Yeah.
It's something that we're trying to add. I'm trying to find a place to add, because when you put robots and stuff in, it's pretty much an open area and it's got a place. But this existing stuff, man, some of the stuff he does is like way over my head. I'm like, it's cool.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Let's see, what else did I have on my list here? Any questions from anybody for Brennan? Anybody that's on here? Okay. Yeah, OpenMV. I've got that down. Tell me a little more about this Casso collaborative robots.
Yeah, Casso. So that's interesting. So Blue Bay Automation out of Nashville, they carry Casso for Tennessee, and we ran into each other at the trade show at the Casso booth. So essentially, Christian Casso, he was one of the original UR guys, and where UR is a 6-axis robot, Casso in the joint right here has a 7th axis. So the way that he can articulate J4, I think that's J4, the way that he can articulate this without moving the end of arm tool makes it have some incredible reach capabilities without necessarily hitting singularities. So this robot has a 7th axis, and it's kind of made for machine tending. And Christian Casso left UR because that's what he wanted to do, is create a collaborative robot with a 7th axis. I'm sure there's other reasons, but I'm a UR integrator. And so when this was introduced to me, I'm like, well, this is pretty cool. I want to use this too. So we started offering this as one of our products, and it can do some crazy stuff, man. Like, they have a cool demo where they have a tennis ball on the end of arm tool, and they're just articulating all of this around the tennis ball, but the tennis ball doesn't move. And they can only do that with the 7th axis. The only downfall right now is, since they're the only ones to do it right now, that a lot of the modeling software like RoboDK, and that's what we use, or some of these simulators, they don't have the right kinematics, because the 7th axis, was invented. But it's a slick robot, and it's got a really nice user interface, and it's very cost effective. So we added it to our product line as one of our offerings.
I just talked to a couple people about they were worried about doing collaborative robots because of safety concerns. They didn't want to take responsibility for people being around the robots, even though it stops on a dime and all this. Have you run into much of that kind of a problem, or are you willing to take those on?
Yes. So collaborative is only collaborative until you have an end of arm tool that's not collaborative. So if you have a nail gun or a torch or a knife or a deburring tool, that's no longer collaborative and needs to be guarded. I'm actually doing a demo in 2 weeks for a customer that they don't, some of them understand that it's safe because it's literally just a robot picking and placing something with a robotic gripper. So it's completely safe, right? So what I like to do is take a demo in and let the robot run into me in the middle of the program, like smack me in the arm. And because as long as there's nothing unsafe on the end of arm tool, to me, I mean, yeah, sure, if the robot swung around and hit somebody in the head, you know, maybe if there's a wide range of motion, you'd have to guard that area. But other than that, we haven't really had any issues. You know, when you have like something that's rotating or maybe a pinch point, what I'll do, depending on if it's working on a moving line, what I'll do is I'll just take a Keyence laser scanner and I'll wire into the UR controller, and they have speed settings. So if you get in range, I'll slow that thing to half speed. So then it's moving at like snail pace. And then as soon as you back out, it takes off and does what it needs to do. But most of the time we have a safety concern on a normal pick and place machine tending application. I just bring a robot in and let it run into me. And that pretty much solves. And then UR has a lot of really good resources on their website that tell you all about the safety and the ANSI standards and all the ISO standards, because, you know, collaborative is a loose term, right? I worked on a project that had nail guns on the end, and that's not safe. So, but yeah, it's getting more and more popular. I think when Fanuc came out with that green robot, that's when the real concerns and people started asking questions, because people started really using them. But now that UR is, you know, 6 years ahead of everybody, essentially, they've got a really good product that's, in my opinion, very safe. But I'm not TUV certified.
Do you partner up with ACS at all?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. ACS is my UR distributor. So
very cool. Yeah.
Anything UR, we work on together with their apps team, and they help me, you know, kind of go over the analysis, and they'll do a safety assessment if I want them to. So we also offer that, and we have a couple TUV certified people that we use, a couple of other integrators that will come in and do a safety assessment. But as long as there's no dangerous tooling, in my opinion, there's no reason not to put a collaborative with a safety scanner.
Absolutely. That's good to know. Yeah. It is a kind of a small world out here. That's one of the reasons I want to try to put together a community where people can share leads and things, because, you know, a lot of us smaller folks especially can't handle the work we've got as it is. And, you know, when we're real busy, it's nice to know people that you can refer work to, that, you know,
yes,
have experience with. Yeah.
Or someone with a specific set of skills, right? Like, you know, if there's a complex welding application that I'm not comfortable with, I want to pass that along to a resource who can. Or, you know, if I'm out of town and I have something go down in Memphis and none of my guys can go, I want to have people like, hey, you know, can you be in Jackson tomorrow to look at a ABB drive? Or, hey, can you be in Auburn to troubleshoot this Siemens PLC? Like little stuff like that. It would be great to have a community and not put out an APB on LinkedIn and get 10 million, you know, bots in your inbox.
Yeah, that was a problem. I put that out there and I was still getting replies weeks later. And it's like, no, you know, it only took a couple replies. I was good.
Yeah. Don't worry. We're in contact. So.
And a lot of them are from India, and they want to come here and they want to work on the system. And, well, you're not here.
Yeah. There's a time and place for that. You know, a lot of companies will sponsor, but most people just need local help, you know?
Yep.
And it's hard because if I was in Indianapolis, this company would be so easy to get off the ground. I have so many contacts and resources, and there's so much more industry there that, you know, I've got 10 people I could partner with, right? And then being here, it's like having a community is the only reason people know me. I think 8 or 9 people recommended me to you, and I had 4 people send it to me directly before I ever messaged you. You know, so without that community, it's like, you know, maybe I would have missed an opportunity to have a good local customer that I could do some real valuable work for.
So that brings up the question, how did you end up in Memphis?
Yeah, so it's really not complicated. I was working for Rockwell at the pharmaceutical manufacturer, and my girlfriend was in a PhD program down here. And I was traveling back and forth a lot, and this was right before COVID, and Rockwell had shut their office down here because I was going to transfer. And I tried for 6 months to transfer because I was just tired of making the drive and kind of wanted a scenery change anyway. And so I got a job offer with MHS, material handling systems, doing package sortation work, and decided why not try it. And so I worked with my boss at Rockwell. We left on really good terms, and I was like, hey man, how do I transfer out of here? And he tried everything he could to find me a job in Memphis, but the only job was in Nashville, and there was no open positions. So I quit, moved down here, and now she's got her PhD and she works for the university, and we're here for the foreseeable future.
Very cool. But you do travel, right? You do jobs all over the country as needed.
All over, from California to North Carolina to Michigan, down to the coast in Biloxi. Mm-hmm. Everywhere. Next week we're going all the way through Alabama and Mississippi and back to do a bunch of work. So, and then week after that, I'm in Rochester Hills, Michigan. Week after that, I believe I'm back in Rochester Hills, Michigan. So
it doesn't matter too much where you're located then.
No, not really. Especially once we get a couple more resources. So me and 3 guys are trying to handle everything.
So I also noticed you had Ignition and Wonderware. So those are kind of opposite ends of the spectrum for SCADA.
Yes. So Ignition is something I don't have a ton of experience in. It's something that we've dabbled in and done some small projects and got certified in. But Wonderware I've done a lot of. And then there's another brand of SCADA, actually out of Nashville, that we use a lot, way more than Ignition, would be the Argos Control Boss. And it's backed on the InduSoft Aviva platform, which is also same people that did Wonderware back in the day. So my Wonderware experience stems from doing a ton of, full package sortation sites in Wonderware, the entire SCADA system. And then now we do a ton of wastewater work with the Argos Control Boss from EMR. And Ignition's one of those things where people either really love it or really hate it or really use it or don't use it at all. So it's one of those things where based on what the customer wants and the pricing, that's how we choose what we go with. But they're both really slick. I haven't done Wonderware in a while, actually. Everything I've done is Ignition and Control Boss. Argos.
Yeah, I teach Wonderware, but our platforms are all pretty old. Our licenses are old. We do Insight, pretty simple stuff, and it's quite a comparison with Ignition. Now, one of my guests on one of my webinars, it's been over a year now, was have you heard of TATSoft?
TATSoft, yes, I have.
So one of the cool things about it does much of what Ignition does in sort of the same way. It is founded by the original guy who started InduSoft.
Oh, that's why I've heard that. Yes, I knew that.
And it's probably half the price of Ignition.
Really? That's interesting.
That was, yeah, it's worth exploring. Now, the one thing they don't have is that, and they admit this, they don't have anywhere near the training like Inductive University, right?
Yeah. But like me and you talked about, my qualm with Inductive University is, with Aviva, with Argos, I was doing work before I was ever trained. And then they have a whole series of YouTube videos from InduSoft before Aviva bought them. And so I've been working through all these YouTube videos in my free time while doing projects, which is how I learn. Whereas Ignition, what I hate is you have to do all this training and then you have to do quizzes and get 100%. So if I do 3 videos today and 3 videos on Sunday, and then I got to take a quiz, guess what? I'm not getting 100% on that quiz, and I'm going to take it 9 times. And so that's what really makes me mad at Ignition is, and they make it so difficult to get trained. And look at all the big Ignition houses. They don't send all these guys to training. They win projects and they let them learn from other people. And so it's a semantics game, which is why I like Aviva. I've already done work. They have free training resources I'm doing on my own time. I have support through my distributor. So it's like, why not? Why not use something different? So the TATSoft would be interesting. I need to write that down too. I know Caleb Travis does a lot of TATSoft, doesn't he?
I think so, yeah.
Pretty sure I've seen him post about TATSoft and Ignition.
Yeah. I don't remember the last names, but Marcos is the guy. He's the Brazilian guy who started InduSoft. He's the head of the software team. And then there's Harry, and I don't remember his last name either, but he's like the president of it. And they came on and we did a pretty good webinar of it. It's on YouTube if you want to know the details. And Marcos got up there and just, did a whole bunch of programming really quick in a half an hour and just showed us all how it worked. It was great. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to. I went to lunch with the Argos guys today, so I'll have to once I get my lab reset up, I'll have to do a demo with you on Argos Control Boss, because the background code that they have written to create these widgets and auto populate your tags and just make your life really easy is like, you know, it's like if you took Ignition and automated setting all of the base stuff up. It is sweet. I mean, you could get like, let's say you had 10 power meters, right? You could set up these 10 power meters in probably an hour, because the way that you have it is you have all these common tags and you can input all this information. Boom, it populates the whole dashboard and everything, because it uses indirect addressing for everything. So it's a sweet setup.
That's Matthew Knight's.
Matthew Knight, yep, EMR and Associates.
Yep, EMR. Yep. And I talked to him. He'd be another guy worth having on to demonstrate what all he does. Yeah.
Yeah, he would be,
about that.
I think it's let me see. The website is either Argos or Control. Yeah, controlboss.com. Argos is the platform, but controlboss.com is where you can check it out. And it kind of looks just like the TatSoft stuff, honestly.
Okay.
TatSoft, don't get mad at me for saying that. But.
Well, I'll look into that. I'm not doing a ton of integration anymore. I've mentioned I'm mostly teach, and I do a lot of work with automation NTH, creating content, but I still have my one customer, and Phil, who's on this thing, actually rode down with me all the way to Miami and hung out at the customer for a few days. It was kind of fun, just kind of showing them what was going on. But again, they're one that I may be able to hook you up with on the robotic side, because I'd be afraid to put in my own robotic system. It's been so long since I've worked with it. I need to find somebody that does that regularly. So
hey, I'll come to Miami.
Absolutely. Be careful what you wish for. August is not the time to go.
It's warm.
Trust me. Yeah, trust me. I spent a couple weeks in the Panhandle and a sawmill, so I am fully aware of how hot and humid it is over there right
I love it in December, and that's the time to go. Any other questions or comments? Anything you want to talk about? What do you do for fun now, Brennan?
Yeah, I do a lot of stuff. I actually, I'm really big into hunting and fishing and golf. So I'm like a serial hobbyist. So I used to do a little bit of everything. So I never got very good at anything. And so now I try to spend all my free time golfing. Two of my best friends have a golf ball company called breakfastgolfballs.com that they started out of California. And so I figured they're scratch golfers. Well, one of them is, and that I really needed to get good and stop sucking, because I'm going to buy a lot of balls from them. And then I like to spend a lot of time out west, bow hunting and snowboarding. So
very cool.
Those are my three big hobbies. But I'm so busy with the control stuff right now. I've got 3 or 4 snowboarding trips planned on top of an elk hunt this year. So hopefully I can do all of those things. But I guess those are all good problems to have.
That's right. You need to find jobs in the places where you go have fun.
Dude, I've been looking for jobs in Montana since I started this company.
You know, James Dean drove his RV up there. He had all those pictures that looked great. I don't think he's a hunter, as far as I know. But
no, he's not. He used to be. He used to deer hunt over in East Tennessee. But no, we talk a lot. You know, he was the one that convinced me to quit my job and start this. And he was just starting to go to Montana when I started this.
Wow. Yeah. Tell me more about that. You said Ali G also helped you.
Yeah, so I would have argued with you about, 2 years ago that I would never run a company, and that it was too much work and not worth the risk, yada, 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 yada. Well, I started getting pretty annoyed with my previous job, just really old equipment, never wanting to upgrade, stuff like that. And I was like, man, I had way more fun at Rockwell and JR. And how can I do that again? Well, there's no robotics integrators anywhere near me. Everything down here is process. And I was like, I really want to do robotics. I really want to do vision. I really want to build, design panels. I'm like, how do I do that? And so I started thinking, I'm like, man, maybe I should start a company. I got no kids. I've got very little overhead. I'm like, maybe I should do it. And I saw James Dean on LinkedIn, and I saw that he had just helped Caleb Travis get his first gig, right? And Caleb Travis is like 5 years younger than me. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, well, if he can do it, maybe I should look into it too. You know, he's young and hungry and it's working out. So maybe it'll work out for me. So I had seen Allie G. I had never talked to her because I think James pointed me in the direction of her actually. So I messaged James on LinkedIn. I'm like, hey man, you know, this is what I'm thinking. You know, when did you know it was a good time? And man, he hit me with a long message immediately and was like, hey man, love these conversations. No time will ever be a good time. You need to double down on yourself. And he's like, it will not be easy. And most people will probably quit because it's really hard to find business and do sales and do the work. He said, but if you're remotely skilled in what you do and you look for business like your life depends on it, you will be successful. And he said, call me if you ever need any help. And then he told me to talk to Allie. I talked to her. She told me her whole story. So I reached out to another previous employer and was like, hey, I'm going to start my own company. You know, do you have anything you need help with? They're like, can you be on a plane next Monday? Put my 1 week notice in because Allie talked me into it. And I quit that Friday and I was on a plane to New Jersey. And I haven't looked back.
That is amazing. I think James is a great motivational speaker. I mean,
Well,
just
dude,
listening to him talk about entrepreneurship and
yes. But he gives all the information away for free, which is the greatest thing that you could possibly do because, I mean, think about Rockwell and their massive knowledge base that they used to give out for free. It's like that's probably what kept Rockwell so far ahead of all these other places is the free resources, right? And what's going to happen when you're the expert and you're telling other people, his philosophy is there is way more work out there than there are people. So why should I not help you? Because you know what's going to happen? I'm going to have a job where I need 3 guys to do something or I need 10 panels built. Guess who I'm going to call? I'm going to call James and say, hey, James, I got a job in North Carolina. Can you build all these panels? And can I use your two of your guys? Sure can. You know, it's like, it's that type of like, and it's not that he expects anything, but like, we both know that if you help someone out, they're going to want to use you or help you in some way too, right? And so that's why it's like there's so much work out there. Like there's a couple people around the area on LinkedIn that are like, you know, everything has to be theirs, right? And it's like there's so many integrators asking me to help them do stuff that like there's no way there's enough people for work. So it's like, why not? You know, if I'm on a service call next week for integrator X and I have one of my customers call me and I could send James Dean or Allie out there to go do it. Why wouldn't I want those resources? But if I never started a company because of that, they would never have any way to work with me either, you know?
absolutely.
Or like even you reaching out about Memphis, you know, couldn't remember my name and you knew there was someone here. It's that same thing where you could have probably done it, right? But you're like, I don't want to do it. I want someone local.
No time. I do not want new customers.
Yeah, exactly. And that's part of the community that I think is great about what you're doing on your website too, because eventually every person gets kind of a niche, right? Where you're going to really have an expertise in something. Right now, I have an expertise in a lot of things, and eventually it'll come down to something where I'm going to be an expert and I'm going to push this off to the side and be like, hey, you know what? I know Frank knows a lot of Cognex. Maybe I can use him for this. Or, hey, I know Phil knows this. Maybe he knows someone, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Your network is one of the most, powerful things that you have for sure.
Your network is your net worth is what always.
That's absolutely true. So another thing I mentioned to you was this Bennett AI, and they seem to be, I'm real interested in what they're doing. They seem to be talking about putting together a networking thing for resources. I don't know what the membership model is going to be, but they already have some big manufacturers, including like ATS. And you mentioned that Flex.
Flexware Innovation. They're the biggest ignition house, number 4 in the nation, but biggest in this area for sure.
Yeah. Phil just put a note on here: condition monitoring and online systems. That is Phil's expertise. Yeah.
I said Phil probably knows about something, and that's what it is. Okay.
Yeah, he does some of the vibration monitoring at the really super high frequencies. I didn't even know anything about that. Not PLC level, much faster.
We do a lot of vibration and flow monitoring with Argos, so that would be a good contact to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, the Bennett AI is really cool, that whole staffing, because people like, you and I, if you get slow, Bennett AI is essentially that person. It's like, hey, I know a guy, work out, and then, and I think this industry is going to blow up, and there's not going to be enough people. That's what's going to happen.
That's already happened. There's, right now there's just a shortage of individual people. There are, some of the big companies, but they don't want to take the small jobs, the NTHs, JR.
Yeah. I mean, the JR and NTHs of the world, they don't care about $200,000-$300,000 jobs. And, those are small robotic cells, that 2-3 man shop can do easily.
Do you partner with machine builders in your area, or do you in the state, or how do you do that?
There's no real machine builders in our area. We're using chief engineering in their shop and their guys. So I'm utilizing a lot of them with my few people that I have, because we do mostly engineering work, and then, they do a lot of design and installation. So I try to utilize them just to stay lean. But, I've got James Dean's shop in East Tennessee if I want it. I have another contact, Cleveland Automation Systems out in Denver. I've got, Tim Hayden at Hayden Automation in Michigan. I've got Tyler Kriebel, Flex Design over. I have so many shops in this massive circle with mine that no matter where I'm at, I can make it financially feasible to get something built with resources in all these areas. And that's what's so great, right? I have the power of probably 30 people right now, not including some of the bigger integrators I do work with that I could do $1 million jobs with, And so that's the power of this community. I think it's so cool. Is like, I don't need 10 guys or girls, because I have all these other people that also need work. So if I got a big job, I'll do this portion, you do this portion, we'll build it on your shop and put it in together.
Exactly.
Oh.
All right. Well, we're coming down kind of toward the end of it. Any last comments or anything from anybody, or?
No, stay active on LinkedIn, talk to people, post, and interact. There's so much work out there to be done, and people who have so much potential to go out on their own or are already out on their own struggling, and utilize the community, get a login at automationllc.com and join this community and look into Bennett AI, and just don't BS people and be authentic. And there's so much work out there to be done. And like you said in your post, you don't have to know everything. You can be taught things you don't know. I quote stuff all the time that I don't know, but guess what? I know about 10 Frank Lambs that know way more than I do.
Everybody has their areas of expertise, that's for sure. Well, so the next webinar is probably going to be September 9th or 16th. Again, I don't have a guest. I've had guests in the past, and the last few, I think, between being in the hospital for a little while and some other things, I've just done my own, whatever I was working on, but always looking for guests for anybody that sees this on YouTube. Most people, I think, just go to the YouTube after the event itself, but it was great seeing you here too, Phil. And I'm not sure, Kevin, I don't know if I recognize you from LinkedIn or anything. I can't see a picture. So anyway, I do put these on LinkedIn, on a YouTube. So this will end up on there probably by Sunday or so. And it's archived there, and people are always coming and looking around. So
yeah, maybe if you don't have a guest by then, I'll set up something with Matt, and we'll do an Argos demo.
That would be an awesome idea. He did come by here and showed me, and I thought it was really impressive at the time, but I was like, well, I don't do a ton of integration work, so I don't know where I would necessarily use it, but it'd be good to know what it is and have it recorded. Yes.
Yeah, and advertising for me, we're doubling down on Argos as our SCADA platform, so I would love to do some more projects with it. But yeah, I just had lunch with Matt's partner, and we actually talked about me coming on here and pitching this to you. So
absolutely, let's try to do that. Again, so I usually do them on Fridays, but I'm pretty flexible. Could be Saturdays or whenever. This is the first 3 in the afternoon one that I've ever tried, but it seemed to work out okay.
I'll stop working. So
yep. Well, all right, guys. I'm going to kind of end it here, and we'll take it offline. Thanks a lot for showing up.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Thanks for showing up, Phil and Kevin.